Please give a warm Grizzly welcome to the Honorable Stacey Abrams.
To President Krzyzewski, to Dr. Kaufman, to Mary Brantley, who's running around here somewhere fixing something, to the faculty and staff, family and friends, and most importantly, to you, the graduates. Thank you for having me here today. And I want to offer a special acknowledgement to your student speaker, Flora Maliu, for his extraordinary story. And I want to lodge a complaint. This is my first time coming, and I'm not coming back if this is what I have to follow. I wrote my speech, and I was thinking about these issues and how to frame this really profound thing I wanted to tell you. And then I get here and I look on your the very tall things behind you, the pillars, and they basically tell you my speech. So if you just want to turn around and read it, I can sit down. But I want to talk to you about creativity, about scholarship and service and leadership. Florim's story is the story that films capture. Films write these movies eager to share a living witness to our shared humanity. I love movies, I love television, I love books, but I really love television. It may be because when I was growing up, we rarely had access to cable TV, mainly because my parents couldn't afford it. We knew times were good at work for mom and dad when we got home from school and we saw this massive cable box perched on top of our television set. For those of you who are under 30, those are the big boxes that are in people's houses. Now, maybe we had cable that month because dad got some good overtime at Ingalls, or maybe mom had taken on a side project in addition to her work as a college librarian. It didn't really matter why it showed up. Before a few weeks, that magical box would appear and we could watch all kinds of TV. But then the light bill would be too high, or one of my brothers and sisters, I'm the second of 6 kids, someone would get sick, and we would go back to a single channel, WLOX, TV 13, ABC. Now, I remember this because for anyone here not under the age of 35, what I describe may not sound like gibberish. But here's the thing. I'm 43. I'm from Mississippi. And when I was growing up in the state of Mississippi, thank you, Mississippi. When I was growing up, every region of the state had one channel. I mean, I know this sounds absurd, but we did. So if you lived on the coast, you got ABC. When we were lucky, we could go to visit my grandparents who lived in the middle of the state because they got NBC. Somewhere north of us, there was this channel called CBS that I'd never really heard of. And if you lived in the big city in Jackson, you got all 3 and you were living in high cotton. So we had ABC down on the coast. And only with cable television could you see all 3 channels. Now, this may sound like a very boring story to you, but this was the crux of my growing up time. Because for us, this opportunity would come and go depending on whether my parents were working class or middle class or working poor that day. Television was a treat for us because my parents couldn't always afford those luxuries. But my parents raised us to not worry about the luxuries. They raised us to worry about our future. My mom is the only person in her family to graduate from high school. My dad is first-generation college, having graduated from high school in Mississippi despite having dyslexia and not learning to actually read until he was 30 years old. My parents met each other in high school, I think because my dad was stalking my mom, but eventually it worked out and they got together. But they wanted to build a different kind of family. They wanted to have a different opportunity. And they knew that for their family, there had to be a triumvirate. There had to be something that brought us together and made us different. Something that broke through the poverty that admired my mom's family and my dad's family. And I want to put it in context. I said Mississippi, so you know I know what I'm talking about. My dad likes to say that he grew up on the wrong side of the tracks, and my mom grew up on the wrong side of the tracks. But what my parents ended up with, despite going to college in a state that really still didn't value them because of their race, was straddling that line between economic security and economic insufficiency. But they were determined that their 6 children would break through. And they knew at the center of that was our education. They knew that at the center of our future was the ability to learn. And so we spent more time reading than we did watching television, which wasn't that big a deal because there wasn't much on. But anyway, I could rarely watch as much television as I wanted, although I became very fascinated with General Hospital, hence writing romance novels. I watched a lot of World News Tonight, so I went into politics. I watched Dynasty, but I still haven't managed to become rich. But what I do have now is a very well-managed addiction to television. I watch everything. I love comedies like Brooklyn Nine-Nine and Blackish. I watch contests like Top Chef, and I watch shows that make very little sense like the nightly news. But my favorite shows are the dramas, from procedurals like Criminal Minds to sci-fi like anything that starts with Star Trek, to the juggernaut of Game of Thrones. I am an avid fan. I am an avid fan of television dramas. Because what I treasure in each set of stories is that creativity. It's the internal struggle of the characters to challenge the inevitable and sometimes the mean, to be more than they imagine themselves to be, to accept the mantle of leadership in large and sometimes immeasurable ways. I revel in the storyline of a single person who has to choose her path and face the consequences, such as the shows I still mourn, like Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And as a politician, a lawyer, a writer, an entrepreneur, I enjoy the complexity of television's vision, condensed into 30 minutes or an hour in this tiny little box. But it portrays the struggle between good and evil and the fact that a lot of options lie in between. But the best television stories are the ensembles, the ones with an outmaneuvered, outgunned, outmatched group of rebels standing up to the consummate evil, otherwise known as any show on the CW. I have a particular fondness for ones that have no true leads, no character at the top of the ticket, just a terrific cast of supporting characters who can take over the whole show if Cersei doesn't do something insane. But these characters are like the rest of the world, sometimes good, sometimes bad, but always working hard to be more. I appreciate your attention so far, and I expect some of you are wondering why I'm talking about televisions for so much of your graduation. But here's the thing. I just met you, and I already know that you are as complex and as grounded and as fascinating as the characters I watch on TV. As graduates, today you join the ranks of a special ensemble cast, those who've sought and achieved higher education despite all the odds, and who now face the ultimate cliffhanger. What's next? Each of us knows someone who stopped before high school ended or barely finished high school, but decided or were told that higher education was not for them. They weren't smart enough. They didn't speak English well enough. They weren't financially capable enough. They were too old or too damaged or first generation, and how would you know how to do it? They were simply not good enough. And some of you sitting before me heard that story and saw yourself in that storyline, and you ignored the plot line. You ignored the stories that people told you about yourselves and decided you would write your own story. You would tell your own tales. You probably all are somewhere in the midst of that opening scene, or you were in the middle of the act right before the commercial when the character isn't quite ready for the next step. It may have been at the beginning of your story or somewhere in the middle, but by the final plot twist, you found the moment of self-confidence and of support, and you brought yourself to college. You found your way to Georgia Gwinnett College into a new level of success. That makes you now members of a community of achievement, one that will demand much of you. You'll be called upon to do battle with temptation, a temptation to focus only on yourselves and on self-gratification. In the days after leaving here, life will conspire to convince you to ignore the obligations to serve others. Sitting among you today are teachers and officers and corporate titans. Along the course of your new lives, you're going to be urged to subtly or not so subtly make decisions that can help you at the expense of others, or help others at some cost to you, some cost to your time, your talent, or your treasure. And what I want to leave you with today are the 3 battle cries to take you into this next life, to help you defeat those urges to ignore how you can do more and be worthy of this moment that you experience right now. What you can do and should do and must do to be like the greatest of characters, to do justice to the community of citizens where you now stand among the privileged. First, I need you to do well. Say, do well. Okay, I know y'all can be louder. Say, do well. Do well. Thank you. Georgia Gwinnett College was not designed simply to impart an education and help you hone a major, that word scholarship, but it was designed to teach you how to thrive and flourish. Within a week of arrival in your next episode, more than one of you will wonder if you picked the right major or made the proper decision, or if they'll take you back for one more semester. When you are challenged to use these new skills to answer tough questions or to create solutions for problems that no one else can see, you will wonder if you can. And what you must do at that moment is simple: do well. Take the lessons you've learned from the extraordinary faculty here and apply them. Lessons about the importance of learning, about the importance of service. Learn about asking good questions and not being afraid of the answer. Lessons about working with others to find better solutions than you can find on your own. Because again, the best shows are the ones that are ensembles. Do well by simply showing up. A degree is only the first step, but you are responsible to this ensemble of graduates to stand as an example of what perseverance and tenacity can achieve, because for many of you, this is not the first time you've proven it. But when you show up, what you do, what is required, and then that little bit more, you improve the lives of others. How? By standing as proof of the value of continued learning, and by understanding that those who didn't or couldn't look to you to show them how to get it done. For those of you who are the first in your family to graduate, you become the next chapter in a family's epic tale. And those of you who've persevered for 4 years or 6 years or 7 years, you are warriors of the mind and go and do battle to change this world. Because once you've crossed that stage with your hot new diploma in hand, I exhort you to continue to do your best. Make your mark on your chosen profession by excelling at every level. Try even harder. Continue to ask questions and never stop the intellectual inquiry that is the hallmark of a graduate of higher learning. Aid your company or your school or your community by challenging yourself to exceed your highest standards. Do well and thrive. But when you do well, I next need you to never forget to do good. Say, do good. For some of you, your journey to GGC started the day you finished high school. For others, it was a dead-end job or too many bills and not enough money, or it was simply a dream of escaping one tragedy and creating a new story. But regardless of why you started, you did start something. You moved yourself and your family to a different place where you now know more, which means you are obligated to do more, to do good, as you must. You must return to the communities that others forget and use the training that you have received to serve. Service can be a career or a quiet Saturday at a homeless shelter. You can return to your high school and talk about why higher education is critical, or to a third grader by yourself who at the age of 8 can either be predicted to be a college graduate or convict. Work in criminal justice or teach English as a second language. Take on the cause of your choice, but remind yourself, but for the grace of God would go you. And let your example be a message about this institution that you come from, about this Georgia Gwinnett College. Do good because it animates the soul and soothes the worried mind, and because we all need reminding that doing well and doing good can go hand in hand. I know of what I speak because I watched my parents, my mother who was a librarian, my dad who was a shipbuilder, but neither of whom could quite get beyond where they needed to be. I watched them decide to go for permanent poverty by becoming ministers. That's what brought me from Mississippi to Georgia. At the age of 40, my parents decided to go to divinity school at Emory University. So I never can tell my parents something's too hard, because when you've got 6 kids, no money, and you're going to grad school full time, nothing else can compare. But what my parents taught me is that we have an obligation to be in and of the community. What they told us is that no matter how little we have, there is always someone with less, and it is our job to serve that person, to be that person's lodestar, to be that person's hand. Be it on a daily basis or on weekends, you must do the work of the people. Take these degrees that you're accruing and put them to the benefit of those in need. Education is a powerful and profound tool that can destroy lives or liberate them. Educational debts are more than financial, they are moral. You have been gifted with the intellectual acumen and the drive to understand your world better than most. And each day that you fail to serve your community, you should feel the burden of that silence. Do good as graduates of GGC. Find ways to give back and to ground yourselves in the reality of the lives you could have been leading. By doing for others, we can recall why we continue to learn. By grounding yourselves in public service, you constantly reaffirm why your education is doubly important. And in those moments, your souls find a certain peace. Do good for others, and you will do good for yourselves. But third, to do well and to do good, it is critical that in every scene of your life you strive to do right. Say, do right. When you stumble and fall, admit it. Because the capacity to admit your mistakes is a fundamental skill of leadership honed by too few. There are scholars and theologians and intellectuals, many of whom are sitting behind me, who ponder the reason for ethical lapses and devise these complex matrices to assess the threshold of morality. It's really not that hard. People just don't like to say they messed up. But sometimes it's admitting a mistake that leads you to leadership. Rarely more often and more publicly than in politics. Now, neither party has a monopoly on mistakes. It is the grand unifier more than anybody can imagine. And no matter what election year commercials tell you, we all screw up. We can point to folks on both sides of the political aisle, in the middle, and standing on the walls, who all struggle with those three simple words, I was wrong. But beyond the easy labels of party and ideology are the deeply held convictions that shape those labels and tell us how we will do right. Too often, adherence to a label of conservative or liberal, of Democrat or Republican, those labels become excuses for inaction and justifications for not doing what's right. Despite the fact that every word in this section of my speech will be heard as subtext, because I'm a Democrat, it's not. In fact, for the next few minutes, if my television confession didn't convince you, I urge you to lay aside your labels for a minute, and I will put aside mine, and just think about the world we want to serve. I make mistakes every day. In fact, my title is Minority Leader. I'm going to lose just because of my title. It is inherent in my job that I will never have enough votes to win a single thing, and yet I'm supposed to lead everybody. Who wants to follow someone whose title says loser? But my job is to not think about what the title says, but what the title means. And for me, Minority Leader is about admitting I don't know enough, that I can't do enough, and that my job is to lead my caucus to do better, to do well, and to do right, and to do good. My title is a title of honor. I take it very seriously. I think Minority Leader is the best job I can have. There's one other I'm thinking about, but that's for another day. But first of all, I love the title because if I stumble badly enough, I know I can lose my post if I'm not ready to explain what I did. And I know that if I say the wrong thing on the wrong stage into the wrong microphone, I'll end up getting PolitiFacted by AJC. And I'm also certain that every word I write and say will show up on social media, and every story I tell will be twisted into some fantastical plot of stupid. But I do it anyway. I do it because I know that the work I do and the people I serve need me to be willing to make mistakes so I can make the right decisions for them. So instead of worrying about whether I'm wrong, I work hard every day to do right, to do my best by each person I serve, regardless of whether they voted for me or not. I can do this because I've met me, and I've learned to be really good at being wrong, at admitting mistaken decisions and apologizing for my errors rather than fumbling to explain them. I'm human, so I still try to explain first, but I work harder each time to simply say, I'm sorry. When I have to push a button and vote for another side's bill, I'm conceding that a better idea has come from the other side. And I try to do right by acknowledging the world isn't as simple as television would have me believe, and as Scandal and House of Cards would have you believe. What I know, though, is that black and white are not the only choices. I don't believe that taxes are good or evil. I don't believe that gun ownership is a sign of the apocalypse. I do believe that poverty is an abomination and economically inefficient, and that freedom of speech must be held sacrosanct and protected from all attacks, progressive or conservative, religious or secular. But most of all, I believe and I accept that I may not know enough about an issue to render immediate judgment, which is why I read everything and study everything I can, and I talk to people with whom I violently disagree. There's a gentleman who passed away a few years ago named Bobby Franklin. Bobby was from East Cobb County. He once said he was so far to the right and I was so far to the left, we met on the other side. Bobby and I agreed about almost nothing. We both read the Bible, but he was very certain mine was missing a few pages. But Bobby was one of my dearest friends in the legislature because he helped me be a better person, because I got to listen to him and learn from him and be a better person because I knew how to be friends with him. We have to be willing to go beyond what we think is right and learn what actually is right. And what is right is being a community of people, not an isolated silo of people who already say you're right. That is what leadership is. That is what scholarship is. That is what service is. What I have learned is that whether you're a legislator or a corporate manager, a nurse or an Army officer, you always have to keep clear in your minds the difference between winning an argument and being right. All winning takes is having the loudest voices and exhausting your audience. But being right takes having the clearest heart. Each of you is destined for more than you can imagine. And with each action taken, each decision made, it will carry a consequence. If you've done well in your chosen fields, if you've sought new and creative solutions, if you've worked hard for your client or your company, then you will have risked your reputation and your credibility. And in the aftermath, if your gamble failed, if you made a mistake, the temptation to fudge the results or admit the truth will rise exponentially because you really like that paycheck. You want to hold back just a little piece of the truth or devise a really intricate story to get you off the hook. But the courage to be honest, to be wrong, and to accept the cost separates a moral leader from a moral pauper. It is in our mistakes and our handling of them that we truly comprehend the nature of things, of ourselves and what we're made of. And nowhere is this more essential than the world awaits you as GGC graduates. Out there, your decisions will affect lives. Just look at the mortgage crisis or the education crisis or the criminal justice crisis or the mid-level bank manager who found a way to make a few bucks by screwing a few people out of their money. We have to make decisions that are good for the least of these more than the bottom line, and that is the sign of true leadership. Morality, ethics, principles, they are not abstract concepts to be baited in classrooms. The life you lead and the people you touch will be informed and shaped by your capacity to admit you're fallible. Do right and make the world stronger for your mistakes. I look at this audience and I see walking contradictions of lovely vision and tremendous diversity. I look out in this audience and I see Georgia. And we look at each other, searching for the stories we tell ourselves because of the colors we see and the languages we hear, the genders and the non-genders that we don't understand, and we tell ourselves stories about our humanity. And when we fail to understand what we see, we are tempted to turn away. But the powerful and painful work of being the men and women you imagine yourselves to be, that Gwinnett College knows you to be, like the archetypal characters who transcend their stories, this will continue for the rest of your lives. What is demanded of you is this, that you honor the sacrifices of your parents and your spouses and your children and your families and the sacrifices you made for yourself in the pursuit of constant progress. Know that as you write your next episode, as you star in that next story, your successes are not simply your own. They are a borrowed legacy that requires more that we share our truth and that we thank those who made it possible. We have to share our victories as well as our struggles with others. As graduates, you're going to be obliged to think more deeply and learn more broadly continually so that you can in turn enrich those around you. But more than individual triumphs, like the privilege of graduating from Georgia Gwinnett College, you are responsible for those who have never dreamed of the lives you will now lead. We, all of us who are beneficiaries of this grace of education, this grace of graduation, we are personally responsible for bringing honor to the lives we lead. So first I need you to do well. Say do well. Then I need you to do, I'll help you out, do good. And then I need you to do right. We're going to try this again. We're going to do what? And then we're going to, and then Georgia Gwinnett College, you can do anything. Thank you.